Gojo and Geto stand side by side as the strongest duo. Inseparable, the faces of Jujutsu sorcery. Right? Where did it all go wrong? It all starts with Geto leaving. We first see Geto and Gojo together, overlooking Udahime's mission. Gojo comes in and asks, "You crying?" He seems quite unapologetic and seems very confident. But there's a mutual respect for Geto. He seems to respect his input a lot, and we can see that they're very close. As he says, "Satoru, it's not nice to pick on the weak." We see Geto as Gojo's foil, as they're opposites in their demeanor, the way they act, but Gojo still has respect for Geto, and they seem to have a very close mutual bond. Gojo is responsible for setting a veil over Udahime's mission, and we see that he's put in trouble for it. Here we get to see a back and forth between Geto and Gojo, where they show where their ideologies clash. We see that Gojo doesn't really understand why he got in trouble, and asks if it's really necessary to set up the veil in the first place. He thinks that normies can't even see it anyway, so what does it really matter? Interestingly, Geto decides to go against this, and says that it's better that they don't see them because it can cause mental calm if they don't know anything. Gojo then says, "Looking out for the weak and protecting them is honestly so exhausting." Geto then retorts by saying that the survival of the weakest is the proper shape of a proper society, and that helping each other is the way society should exist, because Jujutsu exists to protect non-Jujutsu sorcerers. Gojo then finishes by saying, "Moral arguments? I hate moral arguments." Assigning reasons and responsibilities to strength is what those who are weak tend to do. We see that when they were both 17, they had opposite views to what they do now. Gojo doesn't really care for non-sorcerers, and he thinks that they're a waste of time, while Geto defends them by saying that's how Jujutsu society is supposed to work. Gojo and Geto are seen as the strongest together, however they're not built the same. Gojo was the strongest from birth. Gojo was born with the 6 eyes, born with infinity. Gojo isn't strong because he wants to be, Gojo is strong because that's who he is. He's been seen as the strongest, and he has Jujutsu just because he does, and he's strong just because he is. There's no reason or anything attached behind it. He doesn't think very hard about why he fights, but he fights just because he has to, because he's strong. Gojo believes in being the strongest over everything else. Geto was born with a unique ability that no one else had. He was able to absorb curses and control them. He describes swallowing curses as disgusting, and he doesn't even know why they're so disgusting. But what he does know is that he's strong, so he must protect the weak. That's the way the Jujutsu system works, right? Because his ability is so disgusting to him, he always needs to find a purpose and a reason to do things, always thinking things out, always needing a reason to keep going. We then see Gojo and Geto personally requested by Tengen to escort Tengen's new vessel and eraser. Geto asks, "Is this about renewing Tengen's new technique?" And Gojo says, "Huh? What's that?" We then see Geto explain to him what the technique is and what their mission is. As Geto's informed, he needs a reason. He needs to understand why he's doing everything. However, Gojo's just strong, so he doesn't really need a reason, just kind of following what he's told. There are 2 groups after her, the Cursed User Group Q and the Star Religious Group, but more on that later. Later we see Geto and Gojo have a conversation, where Geto says, "I really think you should stop being so full of yourself. You should really be more polite and humble. It would make you less threatening to the juniors as well." Gojo says, "Screw that." We also see the difference in their character. Geto always likes to think things through, not even just when it comes to Jujutsu, but how people have a purpose and something to do. Impressions of people, and we can see a state of mind, always overthinking, always thinking of different possibilities, different options. And we see Gojo as more careless, not really caring where he's going or what he's doing. The second episode starts with Geto making tea while torturing a Q member, which is after the vessel. The Q member says, "I know, I'll go back to the countryside and farm rice." And Geto says, "As a cursed user, you couldn't cut it as a farmer." Even though food's necessary for everyone, Geto thinks that the cursed user is above doing this task of getting basic food for everyone, because people with cursed abilities are more important. We see when Geto and Gojo get in a fight, it's very different. Gojo doesn't have to do much as the infinity blocks everything for him, and makes sure that he doesn't get in danger, while Geto has to put in a lot more effort to do the same thing that Gojo does. When Gojo's in his fight, we see him explain his whole ability and say basically, it's all super exhausting. He thinks he can perfect his technique. He doesn't have to be any stronger because he's already the strongest. He thinks that strength is everything. We can see major parallels between Riku and Gojo, Both of them are special as children, and both of them were treated differently because of what they had. One was Tengen's vessel, the other one had the Six Eyes and Infinity. The only difference is that one was special to be a vessel, and the other one was blessed with strength. Riko talks about her constantly being isolated and her being treated differently, and how she just wants to have friends, wants to be normal, wants to be just like anyone else. And this can probably be seen by Gojo as well, as he said that Gojo had only one friend, and it was Geto. Geto was the only person who didn't see him for someone who was just strong, someone who was just there to help him out. Riko's maid ends up being kidnapped, and normally Geto and Gojo just go on with the mission and move on without her because of how important it is for Tengen to have the new vessel. After Riko cries and shows compassion for the maid and says she wants to say goodbye to her, Gojo negotiates and ends up going with her to help save the maid. This derails their mission a bit, but Gojo still does it for her because he truly cares, even if he can't show it that well. However, he does show through his actions. He wants to make sure that Riko has a good time before she gets sent off, and makes them go to the beach, even though Geto advised against it. This shows Gojo's caring manner. Even when he doesn't show it in front of her, he still wants people to have a good time, and he'll do no matter what it takes, because he's strong. Geto says it's time to go, and then Riko's sad because of this. Gojo sees her emotions and says we should go tomorrow because it's better, just to make her happy even though it wouldn't be best for the mission. This shows how he's caring even though he doesn't want to show it. He wants to have a different persona to what he actually does and feels like. Later, we see a conversation where Geto says, Satoru, you haven't released your technique since yesterday, have you? You haven't slept either, and you don't plan to tonight, do you? We see that Geto truly cares for Gojo and wants the best for him, but Gojo just brushes it off saying it's fine. This shows how Gojo is willing to risk anything for someone who's born into power. Gojo was born into a family of power, born with these abilities, but did he ever ask for this? He was just born into it. He never wanted to be this strong. He never wanted to be so strong that it's almost polarizing to where no one else can understand him. And later we see that no one else can really understand him. People just want him for his money, power, and the things that he brings, but nobody wants him personally. Geto was the only person for him. They end up finishing their mission, and Geto says, good work from everyone. We're now inside the Jujutsu High's barrier. And Geto says, Gojo, you worked really hard this time. Something that's interesting is that he says this time, which means that most times he probably doesn't have to try that hard, or he doesn't have to do that much, because of how much his ability grants him. Geto usually has to work hard, so he'd notice it when it worked hard. And Gojo, exhausted, is finally releasing the technique and says,
I never want to get stuck again babysitting some kid.
this ends up being Gojo's first time ever defeated in his life. He's born with the Six Eyes, born with the Infinity, so any missions he went on earlier, he solved no problem. But this time was different. Toji Fushiguro, a man born without cursed energy, finally took him out. The first person to ever do so. Even though he got stabbed for what was most likely the first time, he still says he'll deal with Toji and that Geto should go ahead, and that Geto trusts Gojo completely and fully goes along with his plan. He doesn't even think Gojo could be in trouble. Gojo even thinks the same thing, confidently saying to him, let's get this over with, as he's defeated thousands before him and he shouldn't be any different. Geto then reveals to Riko that before the mission, Geto and Gojo both said that they'd support Riko's choice no matter what, and even if she wanted to not become Tengen's vessel, they'd both side with her over the society. Geto even says that both of them are the strongest together, and no matter what decision she'd make, they'd both do it together. This shows how idealistic Geto is, and thinks that if Gojo and Geto can put their minds to anything, they're strong enough to accomplish anything. They can do whatever they want to, because they're strong. They can guarantee futures and do whatever they want to, even if they have to fight Tengen, even if any. This is one of the main reasons why Geto was so disillusioned after the fight. He thought they could make anything happen, maybe even just him. When Toji comes, Geto says, how did you get to this place? Toji's a bit confused and says, how? What do you mean? Oh, I get what you're asking me. Satoru Gojo tried stopping me, so I killed him. Geto can't believe this, even though he knew that they were both the strongest. He knew that Gojo was naturally stronger, that he could do everything a lot easier. He could do anything. But this kind of shattered his worldview. This broke what he believed to be true. What could happen? Toji defeats Geto and only doesn't kill him because he doesn't want all his curses to come out. Toji says, "You have the blessing of parentage, but with that blessing you are both beaten by a monkey like me, who can't even use curse techniques." He uses the word monkey, which used to mean non-cursed users, but later it'll take on a very different meaning. Toji thinks he's done with his mission, but then when he comes back out, he hears Gojo talking to himself, saying,
Mom and I'm sorry, but I have to admit, I'm not even angry about you anymore. I bear no grudge against anyone. It's just that the world feels so wonderful right now.
means that he should be angry. Riko is his friend, she was killed, but he isn't. His emotions are gone. It shows how distant his power has created him between him and a normal human being and normal people's feelings. He then says, "I bear no grudge against anyone." He doesn't even hate Toji, not because he forgives him, but because his hatred feels meaningless right now. He's moved past it, not morally, but mentally. He's above it all. And the last part, it's just that the world feels so wonderful right now. This is the scariest part. He just saw a child die, but instead of feeling pain or sadness, he feels euphoria. Why? Because he's awakened. He knows what it's like to be the strongest alone. It's almost intoxicating. Because
Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one.
he ends up killing Toji and makes quick work of him. And then Toji's last words are telling Gojo about his son, Megami. Episode 5 takes place a year after the events. Gojo spent all his time working on how to become as strong as possible to make sure anything like that couldn't happen again. That's how he coped. He's practically invincible, and he still wants to master domain expansion and long distance teleportation on top of that just to make sure nothing can happen. He's an almost unkillable being. Geto is left alone with his ability which he hates to do. He's lost a purpose for why he should go on, why he should still support the non-Jujutsu sorcerers after what happened. He didn't like his ability, but with Gojo by his side it was a bit easier to hold the burden. But now that he's alone, isolated, things get harder as he's left with his own thoughts, asking, why do I do this? Is it for non-Jujutsu sorcerers? Can I trust the system? What's right? What should I do? Geto keeps repeating the phrases, exercise, absorb, exercise, absorb. His life has become nothing but a meaningless task, just doing things which he hates, with no real purpose or cause. He doesn't like his ability and he's always needed a reason to. He used to kind of have the very protagonistic energy to him, where he wanted to do things out of his good and righteous heart, but now he doesn't have that will anymore. The world constantly challenges his beliefs. Geto says that he understood the ugliness of the masses, and he still chose to be a Jujutsu sorcerer who saves others. Curses come from the negative thoughts of those around them who are non-Jujutsu sorcerers. He wants to find a solution.
Damn monkeys.
This used to just mean non-Jujutsu sorcerers, and he used to always look down on them, seeing them as weaker. But after Toji defeated him, he starts to build a resentment towards them, thinking they're weaker, but this time inferior, and he doesn't have his childish ideals, which allow him to kind of look past it and allow him to think of himself as greater, doing a good justice, helping them out. Now he sees them as inferior. Why is he helping them when people die? People die because of what they have to do, protecting their lives and not even being recognized for it. Geto almost doesn't have a purpose. He doesn't really know what to do. And then Yuki enters. Yuki says she's interested in treating the symptoms of the problem and wants to do something that'll treat the cause instead of treating the curses. Most Jujutsu sorcerers just look at the curses as they come up and solve them, but that doesn't solve the root problem. That doesn't solve how we can actually look at the problem and solve it as a whole to make sure no curses will ever come back. Yuki ends up presenting two solutions to the problem. And then she says, "Did you know cursed spirits aren't born from sorcerers?" Geto says, "What do you mean?" And then she explains how it comes from non-Jujutsu sorcerers because they can't control their cursed energy that well, so it doesn't leak out their body at all, or very little. Then they keep talking, and then Geto presents the other solution. Or you could solve the problem by killing all non-Jujutsu sorcerers. Yuki doesn't say it's a bad idea, but she says, theoretically speaking, it's the easiest remedy. And then she asks him, "Do you hate non-Jujutsu sorcerers?" And then Geto says, I don't know, I always thought Jujutsu sorcery existed to protect non-Jujutsu sorcerers, but lately the value of a non-Jujutsu sorcerer has been wavering in my mind. He used to admire the weak, and used to want to protect them and kind of look over them, but now he doesn't think the same way. He thinks that the lives of Jujutsu sorcerers who put their lives on the line to protect the weak shouldn't be how society works. This is opposing to his view earlier when we see him play basketball with Gojo. She ends the conversation by saying, You haven't really decided yet. There are two parts of you, the one who despises non-Jujutsu sorcerers, and the part of you who rejects that. Those are both just possibilities you're considering right now. It's up to you to choose which part of you becomes your reality and true feelings. Soon he'll end up making a choice which solidifies his options with no coming back. We see Geto reach his climax when he sees two girls in prison because of what they think is a monster's work. This is actually just Jujutsu sorcery, as they can see curses, but nobody else can. They call them monsters, and even though she can control her Jujutsu sorcery and she isn't the cause of the curses, they still blame it all on her for being able to see it. This causes his main turning point where he ends up just killing everyone in the village. Then he has Yuko's voice playing in the background, that there's two possibilities and he has to choose one and live by it. He chooses to despise non-Jujutsu sorcerers, and to be able to kill them all. He quickly kills the village and then his parents, and then he has to do his best just to do what he thinks is right. Gojo finds out what Geto did, and then he goes up to confront him, and Gojo says, That's not what I was asking you. I thought you weren't allowed to kill when there was no point. Geto says that there is a point, and significance too. He's not just trying to solve the problem when it pops up, but he's trying to solve the symptoms. He's trying to do his best. Then he says,
Do you think you're the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo? Or are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest?
Geto just gets kind of mad because he thinks if he was Gojo and if he was in his position, he'd be able to do this, and this wouldn't be something that was impossible or unachievable. If Gojo wanted to do it, it would be possible, and he could do it in a few days. This is the breaking point for Gojo because he sees that Geto doesn't even see him as a friend anymore. He just sees him as someone who's got power, another person who just thinks he's just powerful and just strong, and that's it, not as a friend or someone he can trust. Gojo feels isolated by the one person he could call his friend. Gojo feels isolated at the top, and Geto was the one person he could trust. But now that he's at the top alone, he feels isolated, no one's with him, and he wants to make sure that it can never happen again. This is the main reason he becomes a teacher. He doesn't want anyone to feel his pain again. He wants to create a strong society of Jujutsu sorcerers, and he wants them to create a strong foundation, to overrun the foundation of Jujutsu sorcery, and the old men who shouldn't be in charge anymore. The final scene reveals that Geto took over the Star Religious group, and he decides to take over.
Now then, once again, I hate monkeys. You'll obey me now. That's the true thing I chose. Monkeys.
We see a bit more of him in movie Zero. The main part I'm going to go over is right after he dies. He says, If I had Rico's power, I wouldn't have to hide like this and I'd be able to do anything. And then he ends up having a conversation with Gojo where he says, If anyone tells you anything different, just know, I hate those damn monkeys. But he held no hatred to those in Jujutsu High. He says that those people were truly good, but they were just put into a world where they had to support the weak. Gojo then says something to Geto which is never revealed. This could be anything, so there's no reason to guess, but if you do, leave it in the comments below. In conclusion, it all came down to Rico's death and how they processed the failure differently. Gojo chose to get stronger and protect those in the system, while Geto lost faith and decided to look another way. What makes this friendship truly saddening is that it wasn't even about them falling apart. It was about their ideological split, the difference between power and purpose. They were two sides of the same coin, and they would have been best friends in any other world if they weren't torn so differently by ideals and beliefs. Thank you if you made it to the end. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far.